Welcome to Night Church. We are so glad that you've joined us. We know that so many of you had a filling Thanksgiving. Others of you maybe had too much to eat, or you just had some good times with family. Well, we're so happy for that. But here we are on another Friday night, and we are ready to share a meaningful word with you. Our Praxis team has given of themselves in every way to provide meaningful music, a wonderful sermon, great discussions, and so you're in for a treat. And today you're going to be hearing from one of our Praxis elders, Sara Martinez, who is talking about now the third person who is a woman in Jesus' lineage of a 5-part series entitled Bloodlines in Her DNA. You're going to be hearing a story from one woman who's known as a foreigner. Her name is Ruth. And this story tells us a powerful understanding of who God is and what He believes for those who are even outsiders in faith. And so today you're going to hear this word in Hebrew called hesed, because the title of today's sermon is Redeeming Kindness. And that word in Hebrew is literally that notion of redemption. And it is such a beautiful word, and you're going to catch more of an understanding about that coming up. But we want to welcome you to worship tonight on this Friday evening. You might be watching at another time, and so we welcome you even when you watch it. Blessings to you, and may God truly fill you right now. Open yourself up to hear what He might have to say.
Hi guys, will you please join me in reading Ruth 1:15 through 18? And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you will go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more.
Hey guys, would you please join me in prayer?
Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to worship you and for your continual guidance and protection over us during these unprecedented times. We love you and praise you for everything you are, all you have created, and your unrelenting peace that you give us. Help us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. You are our rock and our salvation. Help us to remember you in everything we do. We love you. Amen.
Into your hands I commit again, with all I am for you, Lord. You hold my world in the palm of your hand, and I am yours forever. Jesus, I believe in you. Jesus, I belong to you. You're the reason that I live, the reason that I sing, with all I am. I walk with you wherever you'll go, through tears and joy, I'll trust in you. And I will live I will worship you. I will worship. I will worship you. Jesus, I believe in you. Jesus, I belong to you. You're the reason that I live, the reason that I sing. Jesus, I believe in you. Jesus, I belong to you. You're the reason that I live, the reason that I sing. Jesus, I believe in you. Jesus, I belong to you. You're the reason that I live, the reason that I sing with all I am.
Good evening, friends. So the past couple of weeks, we've gone through a journey of going through the lives of the women in the genealogy of Jesus. Tonight, we're getting to dive into the life of one more of those women, and that's Ruth. She's one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and her story is one that we've heard many times and sometimes presented as a love story, and it stops there. But over the past few years, I've gotten the chance to dive deeper, research, and really delve into this story, and it's brought a lot of new meaning to me. The book of Ruth is unique for several reasons. One, it seems to be written from a female perspective. The reason I say this is it really focuses in on a lot of the challenges and the struggles that women in that time were facing. This book was also written during a very tumultuous time. There was a lot of chaos and there was a lot of idol worship. She also stands out because Ruth was a foreigner that went into Israelite lands and made a difference. In the Old Testament, we have a lot of characters that make a difference, such as Esther, Joseph, Daniel, but they were the Israelites going into a foreign land. Ruth's story is it's flipped the other way. Ruth was an unexpected and unanticipated catalyst to the story of redemption that would lead to the lineage of the Messiah. So our story today is going to span through the whole book of Ruth. So I'll only be reading short passages, and I invite you that afterwards, go through the book, read it, and really delve into the story. One of my favorite things to do when I'm reading the Old Testament is to imagine the scene, place myself into the story with the characters, and really immerse myself. And so journey with me as we go into the story and see God's faithfulness and his kindness show through. The sun is beating down on the backs of two women on the road to their new home. The younger of the two, Ruth, stops. She turns to check on her mother-in-law, Naomi. It's only been a short time since they last said a sorrowful goodbye and left Moab, leaving their husbands entombed. Shortly after their journey, they said one more goodbye to Orpah, Ruth's sister-in-law, who tearfully chose to return to her family. Ruth and Naomi turned, and they watched as Orpah walks back down the road the three women had just come up. Ruth sighs with a heavy heart. Sorrow fills her heart over the past few months. Concern for her mother-in-law's safety and their future is now what fills her thoughts, leaving her no room to think on the loss of her husband, her father-in-law, and the loss of a future she had once joyfully dreamt of. Ruth stops, pulls out a canteen of water, hands it to Naomi. It's speculated that the two women probably traveled with different caravans of trading merchants, probably for safety, but at times they traveled alone. And right now they stop to rest in silence. Ruth stands up, picks up their meager belongings, helps Naomi to her feet, and they continue on their journey to their new life. We don't know exactly what was said between Ruth and Naomi as they traveled from Moab to Bethlehem, and we have no detail of what Ruth may have been thinking. But I can imagine that as they moved further from Moab, further from the place and the culture that she was accustomed to. Her thoughts were many, and her prayers were unceasing. So take a moment and place yourself into Ruth's shoes. She faced more than one obstacle that could have easily discouraged her. She was a foreigner, a widow, no children, no source of income. She was about to move to a place where she would have no community or connections. And she was caring for her mother-in-law who was grieving. Now, Naomi had left Bethlehem years before during a famine and had gone to Moab with her husband and both sons, and it was there where she had lost them all. Naomi begins a journey back home with both of her daughter-in-laws. And during their journey, she tells them, go back to your family. As I said earlier, Orpah returned. Ruth chose to stay. There's not really specific reasons that are listed in the Bible as to why she chose to stay. And we can speculate. Maybe she was hesitant to return home because now she was also an outsider in her home in Moab for marrying a man who was not of their own people. Perhaps, too, she had seen and believed in the God of her husband and of her mother-in-law and father-in-law. And he had now become her God. And I believe that another reason was that the love and the kindness that she felt towards Naomi was great enough for her to come. Naomi attempts to send both women back, and Ruth instead clings to her. And she goes on to say this pledge, this promise to Naomi that's one that we've all probably heard oftentimes, and it's often done at weddings. And it's found in chapter 1, verse 16 to 18. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Did you guys listen to every word in that promise? Talk about a heavy promise. I don't know, have you made one like that before? One this strong? I imagine that Ruth must have thought of what the implications of such a strong promise would be. She was literally putting herself aside, putting her needs aside, and putting Naomi's first, promising to be faithful to her to the end. And so as they continue to walk down this road, they get to the gates of Bethlehem. And immediately, the second they walk through, she stands out. From the way she looks to the way she's dressed, she's instantly pinned as a foreigner. And the problem is that she was not just a foreigner, she was a Moabite. There's history behind that. And that is that Moabite women were thought to be temptresses and seductresses. So I can only imagine that the people of Bethlehem said, "I want nothing to do with her." The women wanted nothing to do with her. And in that promise that she told Naomi, she literally just gave up her people and said, those people who don't welcome me, like if they're your people, they're mine now too. Upon arriving to Bethlehem, she also had no legal status there. And the only way to obtain legal status was through marriage. The two women had suddenly come into a situation where they had an immediate need for basic necessities. And caring for Naomi becomes the forefront of her thoughts and prayers. As a response to this immediate need, Ruth goes and she begins to look for a field to glean in. And she happens upon the fields of Boaz. And she works diligently gathering food. And Ruth must have recognized the dire situation that she was in, because in Ruth 2, Boaz comes, asks the men of his field, "Who is that?" And they tell him. And he goes on to tell her in chapter 2, 8 through 10, he says, "Now listen to me, my daughter. Do not go to another field or leave this one, but stay close to my women, stay close to my men." And he tells her, if you're tired, take a rest. If you're thirsty, go have a drink. And Ruth's response is, then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I'm a foreigner. Her response to his kindness was perhaps out of relief as she's falling to her face, thankful for him. She continues to gather in his field, and Boaz sends home some extra food. The next part of the story is one that I want to take notice of. Is Naomi recognizes, and when she asks Ruth, where did you go? And Ruth tells her, I went to Boaz's field. And Naomi says, this man is part of our family. He could be our kinsman redeemer. He's next in line. Now what that means is he could be the one to marry Ruth, take possessions of their land, have a family, have children, provide, and help carry on the name of their family, of their deceased family. So Naomi seeks Ruth out. She explains the situation to her, and she tells her, go tonight, lay down at the feet of Boaz in the middle of the night at his threshing floor. Because it was a time of great unrest, the fact that Boaz was laying next to his grain, next to his crop, was not unusual. He would be doing that to protect and make sure that his crops were well taken care of and nobody was coming to steal. So Ruth goes down in the middle of the night, and just imagine you're fully asleep, and all of a sudden you wake up with a feeling that someone's near you. He looks down and he sees someone laying at his feet. Now, you and I may not understand the significance, and we may actually think it's strange to go lay down by someone's feet in the middle of the night. But the meaning of this, to lay at someone's feet, was a symbol of submitting to oneself to them, was a symbol of servitude. And this symbol was not lost on Boaz. In chapter 3, verse 10 to 13, he recognizes this, and he's honored that Ruth would choose him to take that role, to play that role as kinsman redeemer. And it's also not lost on him when he tells her, you chose me over a younger man. His Boaz was significantly older than Ruth. Ruth displayed unwavering trust in Naomi and great courage to take a step out that night and to go and to pursue Boaz. Through the story, there's a single thread that seems to weave through every interaction that goes on in Ruth. This element is called hesed. This word is a Hebrew word, and it is mentioned 3 times in the story of Ruth, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Hesed is a very powerful term, and it describes a type of kindness that goes beyond any expectation. It's a deep concern and a care for someone. It leads the helper to literally go and uproot someone from their trouble and provide help. It is a care regardless of the outcome, regardless of the situation. And Ruth shows this type of hesed, this kindness, 3 times. The first, she shows towards Naomi when she tells Naomi that she will not go away and voices that pledge that I read to you guys. And what I find interesting is that magnitude of that pledge probably sat really heavy on Naomi as well, and she realized it because she didn't even bother to argue with Ruth to try and send her back. The second act of kindness happens through Ruth's decision to pursue marriage with Boaz. Through this marriage, Naomi and their deceased family would be honored. Ruth's third act of kindness is towards Boaz. He recognizes her boldness, and Ruth choosing him was significant. Again, I mentioned that he's significantly older than her. So this was a risk in that he and Ruth could probably not conceive, and once again, she would be left as a childless widow. And so he recognizes the kindness that she's displaying towards him and towards Naomi. And I want to propose that the actions of kindness that we see within the story all create that chain reaction. There's plenty of quotes that you and I have read and we see all over the place talking about how kindness can change someone's life. And I think this story shows it in a beautiful way. While we don't know what occurred in Ruth's life before this story, I imagine that she herself also experienced kindness from someplace, whether it was her own family, whether it was from her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, her first husband. And perhaps she experienced the true, first real kindness through the God of her family. It's interesting because God is only ever mentioned as having acted once within this story. However, he is continually referred to by characters throughout the book. There seems to be a knowledge of how God works, how he acts, and the characteristics that he has. And in turn, the characters also act in this manner. They're working almost like agents of God in this story. So perhaps the chain reaction of hesed, of kindness that Ruth showed, started with the kindness she found in God. Follow me now, the chain of hesed. She pledges to remain with Naomi despite challenges. Boaz hears of Ruth's kindness towards Naomi and shows kindness to her by providing food for them. Naomi responds by seeking security for Ruth, and Ruth shows kindness to him, choosing him to be kinsman redeemer. She also shows kindness towards Naomi and their deceased family by marrying Boaz. He acknowledges her acts of kindness with his own acts. You see, Boaz actually had no legal obligation to be the kinsman redeemer because there was another family member. There was another man who was ahead of Boaz who would have been able to step into that role. But when presented with opportunity, when presented with not just the fact that he'd obtained the lands, but he'd also have to marry the Moabite woman and that it would carry on the family name, he said, you know what, it's okay. You can do it, Boaz. And Boaz intentionally stepped into that role, choosing to help carry on the family name and choosing to provide safety and security. I can imagine that this kindness also wasn't just interchanged between the family, but it was something that the community around them saw and that eventually began to change them and impact them. And I think it also impacted the way they saw Ruth, as later on they praise her name and they tell Naomi and they praise her. The act of hesed, of this kindness, is the act that led to the family line of David and eventually the Messiah. And perhaps during this time of darkness in Israel, it was this hesed that was the shining light. Sometimes we ask why books are placed in the Bible. Maybe you've asked us about this book. What's the purpose of this being in here? And perhaps this is why. Because we get to see the real life action of what kindness looks like throughout the book of Ruth. And I think this is a story that was told for generations to come. The story of a young Moabite girl, Ruth, who started the chain reaction of extraordinary hesed. I love to take stories we read in the Bible and see what I can learn and apply into my own life from these characters and these stories. And there's 4 points that I pulled out. I think that these lessons are especially important today in our world, where there seems to be this constant struggle to find meaning and purpose and hope in the midst of challenges that seem to come from all around. The first point that I pulled out that I think applies to us is that just as Ruth was courageous, humble, loving, kind, despite the trials she faced, we can also do the same. Her actions spoke loudly to all those around us. I think the actions that you and I do can do the same. The second is that Ruth's hesed, Ruth's kindness created a chain reaction. We might just create the same reaction by showing kindness to someone who maybe isn't used to receiving that kindness to someone who's different than you, has a different opinion. And it may cause an impact that we never expected. The third point is that Ruth allowed God to use her as a catalyst to their story, to a story that perhaps didn't seem to have a way out. It was a catalyst to the lives of those around her and her own. So I challenge you to allow God to allow you to be a catalyst in your world. Never know what stepping out of your comfort zone might do to the world around you. And finally, I don't think anyone ever imagined that a young Moabite immigrant widow would have been one of the women that God chose to help continue on the lineage of the Messiah. So hear me when I tell you, never think that because of who someone is or because of who you are, that God cannot use you to change the course of history in someone's life. I think that the story of Ruth is one that continued to be told, probably recounted during harvest time. So imagine with me one last time. Place yourselves back in Bethlehem. Several years have passed, and it's harvest time again. The evening has cooled. The town is quiet, except for a small group that's gathering by the fields. You see children running to the group gathered. There's a fire burning, and there's young children, young adults, everyone gather around the fireplace, or the fire pit. And you come closer, and you see a young man sitting there. And you hear him say, "Let me tell you about a story of a woman who followed God, persevered through trials, had courage, showed hesed, and changed our lives. Let me tell you about my mother, Ruth."
Hello and welcome, everybody. We are thrilled that you're joining us for our post-sermon discussion. We'd like to give a big thank you to Sara for the message she just delivered. It was a tremendous blessing, of course. So today I'm standing here joined by my good friend Tariq, and we are going to talk a little bit through a couple of questions that we have about the sermon. And, we would love for you all to think about these questions too, perhaps ask them and talk about them in your own home. So I'll begin, Tariq, with question number one.
Sure.
Ruth here is a person in a foreign land. She goes to a place which she's not familiar with, she knows nothing about. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of those dynamics and some of the difficulties that would, crop up from that reality, going to a foreign land. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, I do actually. So just going off of the story itself, I like how the speaker pointed out that not only did the Moabites have a hard time in a foreign land as anybody would, but Moabites in particular were looked at kind of as temptresses, which adds a whole another angle to the story. So I can only imagine from Ruth's perspective, you don't have any more family, and then the family that you do have is trying to go back to her land, and it's a land where the people don't look at you very, very kindly. That's rough right there. And then personally speaking, I can kind of identify because I used to live in the South, which if you haven't been there is like a foreign land. No offense to my Southernites, but I've been there before, and they kind of look at us Californians a little bit differently. They're not mean, they're not whatever like that, but it's a very different culture, and it can be kind of hard to fit in and to try to navigate the different social mores. So I can only imagine what that would have been like from Ruth's perspective, especially as a woman back then when you didn't have much if you didn't have a husband.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points. Moving around, going to different places is tough, but imagine like today if we were to move to a different country where we don't speak the language, we don't know the people, don't have any friends, family, that would be tremendously difficult. And I think that takes, a lot of courage from Ruth in this story. We see also, like you mentioned, Orpah, her sister-in-law, decided to turn back and go back to her family, which is, not a choice that I have any issue with. I think I would probably do the same type of thing in a situation like that. But Ruth does not do that. Mm-hmm. She kind of, keeps the faith, stays the path, and that's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
And, that's actually a great segue into this next question, which is obviously that was a change of scenery. And Ruth having to be thrust into this new environment, obviously she had to endure some change. But she was able to almost, use that and, foster change for both Naomi and herself. So why don't you talk about that for a little bit, like about that catalyst for change that Ruth ended up being?
Yeah, great question, great observation. I think we today can look at that as a great example to be catalysts for change in our own lives and in the lives of people around us. When we look around, you know, we see things around us, perhaps things that we don't like or that we don't appreciate. And sometimes it's easy to kind of sit on the sidelines and be critical of others or of other situations. And, to be honest, I have certainly done that before. And, maybe it's not the healthiest or the best choice to make, but when we look at Ruth, we see her treat that kind of situation differently. So, as an example for us today, perhaps when we see something, it would behoove us to speak up or to change our own behaviors and to be examples for the people around us. And we also ought to do that in humility and grace. Sometimes it's easier to kind of stand up there on your soapbox and preach down to people. And I don't think that fosters healthy change. I think, that probably makes people angry more than anything. And so we can be catalysts for change through humility and grace and so forth. But yeah, what do you think?
So I actually agree with almost everything you just said. That was actually a lot of things I had on my mind. I also find it interesting that the way that she initiated this change and the way that she was a catalyst. I get nervous just talking to people on the phone. So I can't imagine going to somebody who, even though I believe that they were cousins, it's like a stranger almost. And you go to their place, and then you sleep at their place, and then you sleep at their feet. I mean, hats off to her, because I don't think I could have done that. But the story or the lesson that taught me is, and I love the story of Ruth because every single time I hear it, I pull something completely different out of it. What it shows me is, yeah, being a catalyst for change always sounds nice, but sometimes you really got to get dirty. You really have to do some things that go way outside your comfort zone to have some stuff happen. And if you look throughout history, a lot of these people who made change and fostered a positive change in the world had to do things that pushed them outside of their comfort zone, pushed them to do things that they probably weren't very comfortable or even, if we're being honest, wanted to do to begin with. So the fact that Ruth was able to do that just shows me that sometimes you really just got to get dirty and do some things that you might not want to do if you really want to foster some change and let the Lord just use you as a vessel.
Yeah, getting out of your comfort zone, a tough thing to do, not something that we enjoy doing very often. So that brings us to our third and our final kind of observation and question here. If you notice in the story, Ruth has to take care of herself a lot, but she also has a mother-in-law, Naomi. So let's talk about that for a minute here. Ruth herself, no doubt struggles here. But on top of that, she has somebody else she's taking care of. Do you have any thoughts or observations about that?
Sure. I think that it is important that we, think about ourselves, because obviously ourselves is important, are important. Terrible sentence there. But I think it is also equally important, and not only Ruth, but the story of Jesus Christ shows us too, that oftentimes that selfless love is the best kind of love. And oftentimes it's the most selfless people who end up fostering the most change and who end up really doing more for themselves in a way because they're thinking about other people. I could go throughout history just cherry picking names of people who thought about things and people bigger than themselves. And then even from the perspective of being a nurse, I know that oftentimes you get a sense of fulfillment when you think about other people and you try to care about other people. And I know friends and family who during these current times, one way that they've kind of boosted themselves and helped themselves feel better inadvertently is by caring for other people, checking on other people. And by doing that, they kind of make both that other person as well as themselves feel better and their situation can improve.
Yeah, you make some great points there. It can be easy to be, selfish and think only of yourself, especially if you're in a situation where, you're kind of down and out, or you're struggling, or, you're just trying to climb out of the proverbial hole. But Ruth here gives us a different example. She is no doubt struggling as a woman in a time and in a land where she has no real agency, no real ability to take care of herself. And yet, not only does she do that, she also takes care of her mother-in-law, Naomi. And she does great things for both of them. And she is very selfish in the way selfless in the way she commits to Naomi and in the actions that she follows up with in her statements. And I think we can learn a great lesson from that today. We can take care of others. We can be selfless. We can think of one another instead of only thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
So thank you all for joining us for this post-sermon discussion. Tariq and I had a wonderful time doing this. We hope you'll be back next week for our next speaker in our next discussion. Have a very wonderful and happy Sabbath. Here at Praxis Ministries, which is a ministry of the Loma Linda University Church, we are always tremendously grateful for the generosity and the gifts that come from you all, our viewers, our members, and the people who regularly attend. As a ministry, we are able to continue to function when we get gifts from each and every one of you. So we would like to extend an appeal for you all once again to be generous. Now, there are a couple ways you can give to Praxis Ministries. The first way is you can go to our website, LLUC.org/give. And there you can donate to us. You can find the section called Praxis Young Adult, and you can give to us that way. There is another way. You can also text the number 77977 and text the letters LLUC, and then you will receive a text message in response that will give you a link where you can also select Praxis Young Adult. Once again, we are so thankful for each and every one of you that not only watch, but that also give and allow us to continue to bring programs and one day, hopefully, events and things in person. And we are so thankful for that. Thank you so much for being a part.
We are so glad that you joined us today for another Praxis service. We're so excited for what God's going to do in your life in this next week as a result of what you heard in the Word that was planted in your heart. And so I encourage you, please apply what you learned and look into exactly what God might have for you in this coming week as a result. There's a few announcements I want to share with you. So if you want to follow us and stay in touch about any events or upcoming things, we would ask you to follow our ministry at Instagram. That's kind of the main place that we kind of communicate with our community. So go on to Praxis Ministry on Instagram. Also, some of you are wondering, are we going to be meeting in person? Is something coming up? Well, just stay in tune for that. We're not going to be announcing any dates officially about when we're meeting in person just yet. So please hold on for that. We're also really excited coming up in January. We're launching a Bible study and baptismal series. We're excited about people who want to take that next step of faith, or even those who grew up in church or just kind of walked away from church and just, you know what, I need to understand again. What is it that God's Word says for my life, and purpose and meaning and direction, and understanding who He is. And so we are thrilled about what's coming. So please do direct message us on Instagram for an update, and if you want to actually be part of that. We will be sending out a more formal invitation to that coming up in the next weeks. Also, if you would like to be part of a church service on Saturday mornings, we would love to have you at the University Church at 9 and 11:45 a.m. online at our YouTube page, Loma Linda University Church. And with that said, we'll see you here next Friday night, 8 o'clock, same time, same place. Blessings to you. May God fill you with hope, purpose, and meaning this weekend and as you go forward.